Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the newest record from Miley Cyrus called Younger Now. You know, I said it last time I reviewed Miley Cyrus, and I'll say it again. On some level, didn't we all see this coming? Is this surprising anybody? Okay, maybe not for everybody, but when I first saw some people genuinely seeming surprised that Miley Cyrus was returning to country music, note the word return, that's gonna be important here, I just had to sigh and shake my head a little bit. Because right from the very beginning, Miley Cyrus has always played as the LA outsider coming in from the country, from Nashville. Hell, it's the entire premise behind Party in the USA 8 years ago. And with her thicker accent and twang inherited from her country singer father, Billy Ray Cyrus, there was a part of me that deep down knew that a country pivot would happen in the course of her career. Granted, if you consider that career over the past decade, I can see why some might not have expected it, at least not this soon. From electro-pop at the beginning of the club boom to the awkward trap sounds of 2013, a year where her fame was at its uneasy peak, all the way to the nightmarish mess of psychedelia that plagued her disaster of a 2015 record, Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets. Because, you know what, there were some consistent through lines in her art. Reckless provocation without much weighty content in order to back it up, production that tried and mostly failed to support her, and in her trap-leaning years an approach to hip-hop that was all kinds of tasteless and raised some ugly questions about white pop stars pilfering from black culture. And now that she's got all the partying out of her system, she can leave that job for Post Malone and go back home for a nice, safe, white bread sound. And as such, I had very little interest in covering this. This is why the review is so late. If I wanted a pop star dabbling in country, I'll stick with Kesha, thank you very much, who at least seemed to care about her art, and who I could at least see fitting in with those experimenting in the genre in the indie scene. Whereas a disheartened Miley after the election year was claiming that she could reach out to a more conservative demographic with this new image and genre shift. Now, there are all sorts of problems with this assertion without even getting into the optics, and we'll get to some of them, but you know what? All of it would be irrelevant if we didn't talk about the music first, so what did I find on Younger Now? Honestly, I wish I disliked this more. At least that would make this have some potential to be interesting in this review. Because I've gone through Younger Now entirely too many times, and my overall response after every single listen remains the same. Well, that happened, that existed. I can't even get angry about lost potential and artistic betrayal of ideals, because she's already shown us how far she can fly off the rails when uncontrolled, and when it comes down to the depth of her ideas, I'm not sure there was ever enough from Miley to really betray here. But again, the conversation needs to start and focus on the music, so let's get this out of the way fast. This is barely a country record, at least in the traditional sense. Yeah, Dolly Parton is there for Rainbow Land because I think she's way too nice to say no. And yeah, you do get some fiddle and pedal steel in the final two songs that come kind of close in the right tones, but this is much closer to a retro-leaning pop record that could have dropped in the early 60s, especially in much of the compositions. And you know what, to her credit, Miley does sound better over this production than most. It flatters her thicker accent, and it's clear that she's quite comfortable with it. Now, is she ever gonna bring the firepower and intensity of her best songs in the past? Well, Bad Mood and Love Someone get kind of close, but really the mixing is way too much poorly placed Lana Del Rey-esque reverb on the vocals to flatter that raw intensity. And that means we have to start by talking about the production here. Because unlike pretty much everything she's ever done before, Miley's only working with a single other producer this time, Oral Yol. And when you start hearing some of the slapdash mistakes in the mixing and recording, you can tell inexperience is coming through from the both of them. Now, Yol has worked with Miley before on songs that were never all that good. He co-wrote Adore You, and you could tell, but his biggest other credit is Asher Roth's Asleep in the Bread Aisle. And there's a part of me that just feels like they're over their heads at this point. Now, I'll admit that I've warmed up on Malibu a little bit. It easily has the most distinct hook on the album, but the sloppiness of the guitar loops, especially against percussion that rarely ever synchronizes properly with the bass lines, it always pulls me out of that song. In fact, I'd say the drums and percussion are a consistent problem with all of this album. Awkwardly placed in the mix, entirely too stiff, and for as liquid as many of these guitar grooves are trying to be, that's a very real handicap. Now, I was willing to forgive some of this. It's clear the guitars are going for this misty, sort of ramshackle, vintage hippie country tone, or just like modern folk like I'm Bad Mood, as are most of the vocal lines and multi-tracking, but some of them are not, along with the majority of the percussion, leaving a sound that is less the burnished organic vibe that you get from a guy like Dave Cobb, and more the vein of Meghan Trainor updating doo-wop for the modern pop era. I didn't like it there, I don't like it here. Now, that's not saying that there aren't some agreeable tunes here. After all, overall, Malibu did grow on me, and you know what, for what they are, Bad Mood and Inspired are decent enough as well. The production issues, they don't quite get in the way of these tracks. But now we have to get to the content, and where we need to admit that for as much credit as I've given Miley Cyrus, she's never been deep. And normally that's not a problem, especially in Miley's brand of pop music. It can be flighty, but there is a place for that sort of vibe and energy. And yet when you get to the writing, this record doesn't remotely come close to sticking the landing. For one, the lack of distinctive details and the abundance of obvious lyrical cliches makes the writing feel very thin and lacking in unique character for her, which could have had a shot at working if the overall tone kept any of Miley's sunny energy or charisma instead of just drowning her out in so much reverb. But I also get the feeling that she expects all this to be taken very seriously, or that she thinks there's real depth in these songs. And yet, let's not mince words, this album is vapid as hell. The relationship details are flimsy, and Miley shows herself as shockingly lacking in confidence or impetus to act on songs like Weak Without You or Thinkin or Love Someone, where she knew since the very beginning that this guy was not the one. So ask the same question I asked Taylor Swift 5 years ago with I Knew You Were Trouble. Why did you even start the relationship? But what's even more exasperating is that Miley is delivering and writing these songs with the conviction that they do mean so much more than they actually do, and makes how hard they all fall short all the more striking. I mean, I like the tones behind Inspired, but when she says this is like a modern update of her earlier song The Climb, I believe it, because it's just as empty and cliched on some level. Not a good sign if this was a track that she was intending for the Clinton campaign in 2016. And on that topic, for as much as Bad Mood references breaking glass ceilings, the song is so maddeningly unspecific that there's no focal point for any real outcry, so there's no fire behind the song. And while She's Not Him is trying to normalize pansexuality in this breakup, the sloppy pronoun usage and wonky framing that still has her wind up in a nice and safe and straight situation, framed more as a flirtation with bisexuality than anything deeper or real, that does bug me on some level. And then you remember that Miley Cyrus was intending this to appeal to a more conservative crowd, and thus this album starts making a lot more sense, where you get a song like Rainbow Land, which has all the hallmarks of 60s hippie country, but none of the ideals behind it, because she's in a comfortable position where she doesn't need to stand for any ideals. Of course she's going for unthreatening, retro-leaning pop that places her in a more demure, traditional gender role, because that's the sort of music that won't challenge the audience she's now trying to court, either through her choices or her incompetence. And she plainly stated that was her goal with Younger Now, so you know what, in a twisted way she kinda succeeded. I guess I can give her that. But it's not a goal that I can respect from a standpoint of artistic progression, and it does feel like she's going backwards. And yet, whenever Miley Cyrus and her dead pets got close to any sort of real revelation or a moment of real potency where it actually could potentially get real, she backpedaled there too. Never got too real, we probably could have seen this coming again. Younger Now, look, the album might be more listenable, but artistically it's a sort of bland pablum that utterly squanders whatever potential and forward momentum she might have in favor of pandering to an audience that will not empower her, and given her highly publicized antics in the past, probably won't even care about this record. But hey, if you're part of the demographic that wants to hear more safe music in the vein of Meghan Trainor's debut and Ideology, if not Sound, I can kind of see you liking this, so enjoy. But otherwise, this is a light 5 out of 10, no recommendation, and Kesha's Rainbow did these sort of songs far better this year with a Dolly Parton collaboration of her own. Skip this album, and frankly, considering covering this late, you probably already have. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know, I was kind of mean on this. You probably didn't see my last review, it was a lot meaner there, but man, this album just did nothing for me. There was just no substance to it. It was so flimsy. The tones might be better, but not by much. But yeah, if you want to buy the record, links in the description below. And I got the poll up there for all you diehard Miley Cyrus fans that are left that you like this. Go ahead, tell me how wrong I am. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or support this channel, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule, so I don't cover records like this as late as I did. More details right there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.